I shouldn't have done that.
I was trying to figure out what song to play as outro music for this one, because it's, it involves witch burnings, so I was kind of thinking Burning a Sinner by Witchfinder General, which is a really good song for that kind of vibe. But also, since it's called The Coming, though, and all I can think of was that is the Busta Rhymes album, The Coming. So I kind of want to also end it with just Woo-Ha Got You All in Check by Busta Rhymes. But
that would make me feel cooler, but so would the Witchfinder General.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Nameless Cults, a podcast about horror movies, weird fiction, and the dark bowers of man's domain. I'm Michael Robertson, and with me as always is Dan Cullen. We really haven't missed a beat, have we, Dan? We're on top of this. Yeah, those like cheap VHS era horror movies, they are very soothing and definitely take me back to being a kid. And I mean, the movie we're going to be talking about now, it really ties into all of this, because we're going to be talking about a movie that never escaped the VHS era. This is a movie that still, I think, has no DVD release of any kind.
Well, you would think that somebody would want to like pick it up, like Vinegar Syndrome or someone.
Yeah, this seems right up their alley. And I would like to see a cleaned up version of this one, actually. But the movie we're talking about is The Coming, from 1981, also known by the name of Burned at the Stake. That's what you'll find it under on Wikipedia and IMDb. But I knew this one as The Coming, and what attracted me to this one really was the poster art I had seen. I'd seen it in two places. I'd seen it, floating around on Letterboxd, I think. I'd seen people talking about this movie. And on a recent trip to Salem this past August, I went to the Salem Witch Museum, which will come up again later in this episode. And in a little section in the back of the museum, they have a wall where it's all posters of movies either about the Salem witch trials or set in Salem or about witches. And, most of them are kind of the classics. You got your The Crucible, you got Hocus Pocus, and then there's this one just in the corner, this really cool, very striking poster. It's like a pale blue. Yeah, it's a really intriguing poster art. I really quite like it. It looks almost less like a movie poster, more like a horror paperback cover, kind of. But yeah,
I think it looks like a paperback horror cover that has been like in someone's window getting sun bleached for a long, in a good way. It has a very weird color palette.
Yeah, I think it's the color scheme that really makes it stand out, and also just like the expression on the woman's face. Doesn't particularly look like any character in the movie, but it's a very striking little piece of art nonetheless. So yeah, I had to seek it out.
So what you're saying is similar to how you pick out VHS tapes at like a vintage store. You pick out your Halloween movies based on how they're displayed at museums.
Yeah, well, it makes a good Halloween movie, I think, because we've in some of our past Halloween episodes we've tackled your Draculas and your Frankensteins, but witches, very very classic Halloween movie figure. We already talked about Hocus Pocus. That's like some plenty classic witch movies out there, I suppose. But it still feels like an unsung genre. I mean, you got your Hocus Pocus, which I rewatched recently. I like Hocus Pocus. I was thinking with regard to this movie too, watching it, like it takes place in this movie and that movie take place in Salem, that there's a lot it shares in common with it that I don't think was intentional. But speaking of people that have a real legacy in horror, I didn't recognize any of the names in this movie, except the director sounded kind of familiar, Burt I Gordon. So I looked him up, and I don't know if you looked him up, but this man is bad movie royalty. He has 8 movies that were on Mystery Science Theater 3000. That's a pretty great credit to your name. The
only thing that I knew when I saw his name comes up like right in the opening credits, and I imagined hearing Mike Nelson from Mystery Science Theater saying Burt I Gordon, and I was like, okay, this name is familiar, and I didn't want to like interrupt it, so I just let it go. I didn't want to go in with a bias, basically. But you're not kidding. Royalty is a good way of putting it.
Yeah, because he goes way back. Because when I'm talking like Mystery Science Theater, like he did the amazing, he got to start in 1954. He did the amazing Colossal Man. He did Beginning of the End. That's another favorite Mystery Science Theater episode of mine. Actually, that's the one with the giant grasshoppers.
Can't handle that one. It's so bad.
This guy really toiled in the trenches of B movies for a long time. This one came out in 1981, which is pretty late in his career. It looks like he did like 4 movies after this, 3 kind of throughout. He kind of sputtered out over the course of the 80s and then did one random movie in 2014 called Secrets of a Psychopath.
That title is pretty fun. For some, knowing how this movie played out, I'd be curious to see like what that's all about. But it's funny because this movie feels like, I would say this movie is quite high energy in a way. And it's toward, it's not like a movie he made when he was 20.
No, yeah. It is funny, though, at the end of his Wikipedia page, the C also just links to the pages for Ed Wood, Coleman Francis, and Roger Corman. So that's the kind of company this guy's in.
I'm surprised Forrest J. Ackerman isn't on there.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't really a filmmaker. He was just a big nerd.
Fanboy.
He should be linked on Mick Garris's page. Famous fanboys. But actors and actresses, not many people I noticed of note, but there are a couple things worth noting. Are the lead actress in this movie, who plays a dual role as a little girl, is
Laureen.
An actress, Susan Swift, who is most famously known for the lead role in Audrey Rose. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, that name sounds like a name that one would know.
It's I've never seen it either, but it's a pretty notable Exorcist knockoff, is my understanding. It features Anthony Hopkins, directed by Robert Wise, who's directed, among other movies, The Haunting and West Side Story. I think he directed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, West Side. The Star Trek motion picture.
Oh yeah, that was him too. Yep. Really interesting filmography on that guy. But yeah, so she's got some horror priors, at least. That movie was about 4 years before this one. I also noted that Guy Stockwell, who plays the psychiatrist in this movie, he seems like he's been around for forever too. His credits go back to like the 1940s, but the only other thing I know him from is he has a very notable role in Santa Sangre, the Alejandro Jodorowsky movie.
I haven't seen it, actually. The little girl's name is Laureen.
Yeah, which I kept hearing as Laurie. I did not realize it was Laureen until about halfway through.
I didn't catch it was Laureen at all. And then earlier when we were talking about the poster, I pulled it up because I looked at it when you initially sent it to me, and it's on the poster art. It's Loreen. Like, is there a more 1970s name than Laureen?
Yeah, I don't feel like that's a very, even for that name, that feels like a weird spelling of it, too. It's a throwback.
Like Laura, you would think Laura. You want like a movie, a classy movie about possession. That's a common enough name, but it has some elegance to it. Laureen? I don't know.
Well, we get all these cast names over a bunch of diorama figures of witches, which was my first inkling as I was watching it was, is this the Salem Witch Museum? The one that I just visited, one of my favorite places to visit in Salem. And sure enough, it will be confirmed that it is the same museum. But we open on March 1st, 1692. And pretty much the very first thing we open with is the infamous pressing to death of Giles Corey. Everybody's favorite bit of Salem witch trials lore.
I don't know anything about the witch trial. Isn't that ridiculous?
Oh, well, you should go to the Salem Witch Museum. Although, honestly, as I'll get to later on, this movie kind of gives you a lot of the Salem Witch Museum experience. But I still recommend going. When me and Shelby went recently, like it was her birthday, and we did just a few days in Salem, just got a hotel room and chilled and did all the fun touristy stuff.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's worth doing. Like the cheesy tours and the cheesy witch museums. It's fun as hell. I definitely recommend it.
I lived in Salem for like a 6-month stint, and I wasn't there for the Halloween season, and everybody that lived in Salem, most of whom like Halloween, were like, oh my god, you gotta get out of here before October hits. It is going to get milk takes 2.5 hours. Not that anyone goes to get milk anymore, but is the
to
museum
feed the black cats that wander around Salem.
Oh no, those cats drink blood, Mike. My favorite one as a kid, I never had been, and there's a train that goes through Salem, and on its way into Salem, it goes under a bridge. On the top of the bridge, it says, "Welcome to Salem," in, like a standard town sign. And under the bridge, in the shadows, in blood red spray paint, it said, "Welcome to Salem, City of Witches." It's like, this could not be more perfect.
Yeah, City, USA, baby.
You're right about, going and actually getting the full treatment, because, I know the trials exist, but I couldn't tell you a thing about it except that a bunch of people died.
Well, I can tell you they made Giles Corey's death way lamer in this movie than it was in real life. Because Giles Corey, he was the only person that was pressed to death. Everyone else in the Salem witch trials was hung. I forget why he got the most gruesome death, but they kept, the whole thing was it was sort of like you see in the movie, they put a big board on him, and then they put rocks on top of the board and kept adding more and more. But in real life, what is the very badass thing about this is he is reputed to, every time they asked him to confess to being a witch and to his wife being a witch and all this, he just said, "More weight," and just kept telling him to just put more rocks on. In this movie, they go way lamer, and instead it's the Inquisitor who keeps saying "more weight," while Giles Corey confesses to being a witch, something he famously didn't do and refused to do to the point of death. Some real character assassination of Giles Corey here. Way lamer than by all accounts he was.
You don't want to do that with people who are, capable of coming back from the dead, potentially.
Oh yeah, maybe that's why Burt I Gordon didn't make many movies after this. Because this is clearly filmed on location in Salem, too. They really went and did the full 9.
I was, watching it like a hawk, hoping to see the building that I lived in. I lived, in the center of what I guess you'd call downtown Salem, in a big old mill, and it definitely existed at the time this movie was filmed, but you never actually see it. But yeah, no, you're right. They filmed this movie in Salem, and it's we've talked about this before, regional horror. This movie is living and breathing it.
Yeah, the voodoo of location, as Werner Herzog would say. But yeah, we get to see Giles get pressed to death. As long as I'm being nitpicky, I don't think he would vomit out blood like he does at the end. He just kind of explodes like a grape.
That was awesome. It set the stakes that this movie was not going to be a PG made-for-TV movie.
Yeah, because in many other scenes, this movie feels like it would be something like a semi-educational after-school special.
What? But, no way. I thought it struck me as being the ABC movie of the week a little bit, and not in a bad way. But it does have some moments of gore or not gore, but violence, and that's what got me in. I didn't know about Giles's amazing response to having weight put on him, but I wonder if they did that to thinking no one will give a shit about him and his character, in real life, but maybe to just establish how evil, what was his name? It was it wasn't, Joylight, but he had a cool last name. The, Paris, right? Parrish? The villain.
Reverend Paris. Yeah.
Paris.
I'm clearly not up on my Salem Witch Trials lore entirely because I don't remember if that was the real name of the judge. Because for most of the other characters in this movie, they do use their real names. But that's another character, the Reverend, that they do a fair bit of character assassination on. So I don't know if he was. No, yep, okay, I looked it up. He was the Puritan minister in Salem Village. So yeah, they're just going all in on using all these people's real names.
I feel like you don't get that often in horror, where real-world historical figures are generally portrayed. Look, but yeah, no, awesome opening. I was completely hooked. I don't believe I've ever seen anyone pressed to death in a movie before. Have you?
No, because I don't even think they show that in like the Crucible in like most adaptations. I feel like they have that off screen. I don't think I've ever seen actually the death of Giles Corey or a similar death enacted on screen. So, kudos to this movie for actually depicting it.
Yeah, if it was any more violent and if his performance was more intense, like I thought his performance was great. It sounded horrible. If it was any more intense, I wouldn't be able to stomach it because it seems like one of the worst ways you could go.
Well, again, it's one of those things I feel like in real life it would actually look like considerably less like gory than they made it for the movie. I feel like he would just kind of go like and die. But, I don't know. I've never seen someone pressed to death in real life either. So
I feel like if you put like, they're doing it in these stone block by stone block. I wonder if like they put, one on there and that's it. Like all of your bones give out and you just pancake.
I feel like that's sort of how it works. I feel like, the last one would be like the size of a pea. I feel like the one that really does it. But we move on from the tragic end of Giles Corey to the story of Sarah Good and Ann Putnam, two more figures from Salem witch trial lore. And, they've got Sarah Good on trial for being a witch. And Ann Putnam, their star witness, she takes a dive and starts seizing up on the floor and saying that Sarah Good's doing her witchcraft on her and really, putting on an A+ show. I was saying this whole thing could have been avoided, the Salem witch trials, if they had just gotten Ann Putnam acting lessons, because I feel like that's just where this energy needed to be channeled. She just wanted to show off,
One thing I thought was like, if I was on trial, they're all in this big courtroom together, and Putnam falls on the ground and just starts writhing and screaming and saying, she's been hexed. I would just do the exact same thing. Fall on the ground, start screaming my head off and like mirroring her, and then just go, look. And like while you're laying there, go like, look, like anybody can do this. Come on, like try it out. And just like try to make, because, anybody can do that. I can't believe people took that seriously. Well, I guess.
I feel like that's what you would do if you wanted to drag the other person down with you. Because I feel like in Puritan Massachusetts, that would just result in both of you being arrested as being witches.
I would, Mike. If you hexed me or you were fucking around like that in the courtroom, I'd take you down with me. We'd both be under those stones. Or I guess in their case.
You hex me, I'll hex you right back.
Well, that's true. I guess we would be like the Sanderson sisters. We'd get hung together.
One of my favorite lines in the movie comes right after this when Papa Good is, trying to stand up for his wife that's being accused of witchcraft, and he says to the judge, "This be not the Dark Ages, Your Honor. This be 1692."
I loved that.
I just loved
line.
it 'cause it's just like in every other like shitty movie where someone's like, "Hey, it's the 90s," or "Come on, man, it's the new millennium." Just like, come on, man, it's 1692, the year of our Lord. We're past such foolishness.
Everyone's always going to say that, and time is a flat circle, so it'll always be funny.
He also gets some very good, goofy period piece dialogue right after that, where he says, "This child's wretched mumming belongs in a clumsy backwoods puppetry."
That was an excellent comeback, though. Like that's what got me thinking about it, where it's like, people, hopefully could have just like mocked it, where like it is pretty funny. Like she's on the ground screaming and writhing, but like if anyone there was watching her, they would see her like frantically look from the girl on the ground to like, I don't know if she looks at Paris, but it isn't in that scene. It's a similar one later where she has like this comically villainous, like suspicious look on her face before she throws herself on the ground.
Yeah, she's an evil little kid. And once, Papa Good is pushing his luck trying to, say that she's full of shit, she doubles down and she accuses his daughter, little Dorcas Good. This was the moment where I had to look up and see if that name was accurate. I recognized, the name Sarah Good. I recognized Ann Putnam. Sure enough, Dorcas Good. That is actually... So apparently her real name was her real name was Dorothy. But on the arrest warrant, for some reason, they wrote it as Dorcas, spelled Dorcas. So
with a C.
Little
okay, that's
Dorcas Good.
I don't understand the us like that. I don't know, like, is that maybe a sign of affection or something? Like the way we would say, like, Danny instead of Daniel or something? Like maybe that's how the Puritans did it.
I think the arresting officer likely just couldn't spell. Just wrote down Dorcas Good.
I steadfastly decided not to look her name up as soon as they said it, because I was like, I'm just going to go under the assumption that it is, in fact, Dorcas, and I'm not mishearing.
Well, it took a while for me to figure out what they were even saying. I was like, is it Orcus? Is it Porpoise? But eventually I heard it clearly. It was Dorcas. And yeah, this kid's name was Dorcas. Middle name, Malorcas, I assume. Dorcas Malorcas Good.
Is that from something?
I think that's another unconscious Simpsons reference. That,
it sounds like
Bart
a Simpsons
Lisa
character.
A Dorcas Malorcas. Yeah.
Orcus would have been a fantastic name for the cute little girl on trial. Oh, I'm not a demon worshiper. No. It's just me, Orcus.
So we go from there to a pretty immediate flash forward into the present, which I was not expecting yet. I was thinking this movie was going to take its time, show us some witch executions, but instead jumps straight from the trial to present day, where we see little Laureen playing hopscotch and getting ready to go on her field trip to the Salem Witch Museum. And this was when I started getting really excited, realizing they were in fact going to go to the actual witch museum.
And really, the Salem Witch Museum and not some Hollywood version of it.
No, yeah, I wasn't sure, because I wasn't sure yet how much of this was filmed on location. But once they start showing Salem, it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely it. The Witch Museum looks now exactly like it did in this movie in 1981.
I wanted to ask you that if, like, the dummies are all the same and whatnot. That'd be so cute.
I'll get to it, trust me. But I do like that there's also a little girl on the bus with her who's like, I've been to the Witch Museum 8 times. Just one little girl who's just really fucking into the Witch Museum. I like that kid. That
kind of comes up later, too, where, like, someone's talking to a character and they're like, well, all the kids are into it. That's kind of fun that it supports it. I didn't catch that she said that.
Mm-hmm. And the kids then get all worked up and start yelling at the window at calling some lady a witch.
Who admittedly looks like a witch.
Yeah, my notes were that it's Mrs. Blaylock walking her dog, because it looks just like the evil nanny from The Omen, and she even has the same, like, Rottweiler dog with her.
She's way cooler looking than that lady. The lady in The Omen is, like, scary. This lady looks like the most fashionable witch of the 1970s.
I'll bet there were more fashionable witches. I mean, what's her name? Stevie Nicks was around in the 1970s. I think she was a more fashionable witch.
Yeah, that definitely counts. What's the name of that lady in you must know, the lady, the witch of Salem. Not Marie Fowler.
Marie Laveau? That was the, wasn't she? She's the witch of New Orleans.
Laurie Cabot, that's it.
Laurie Cabot, who is that?
So, apparently, I don't understand this, but I remember in college, a friend of mine went to Salem and was like, oh my god, I met Laurie Cabot. And went on to, she's like, the official witch of Salem. And somehow this person, Laurie Cabot, apparently is somehow able to market herself as the official witch of Salem. Like, when I was there, she had like a shop that said that over the door, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I just looked her up. Yeah, she's got a witch shop on Pickering Wharf in Salem, although it says she's originally from Weehawken, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be something like, what's that funny town in Missoula? Like, she's from like Missoula or Weehawken, New Jersey or something.
Interesting.
She was probably a young, fashionable witch at the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's where all the young, fashionable witches go. They all go out east. But when the witch when the bus is going by this witch, whose name is Merlina, feels like a lazy witch name, kind of, just going for Merlin and putting an A on the end.
Holy shit. Whatever. I didn't catch that was her name. That sucks. The dog's name is
screenwriter
fantastic.
Moment. Wait, what was the dog's name? I don't know if I caught that.
Cerberus.
Oh, okay.
Which is not a fun dog name, but just, I guess more what I'm saying is the dog was seriously my favorite character in the movie.
That's true. The dog is a good character. I feel like the really clever thing to do, though, would be to get 3 dogs and name them all Cerberus.
That would... Maybe 3 dogs played that dog.
That's true. That is a possibility. But as they're going by Merlina, all of a sudden, Laurie seems to get zapped by an invisible something. And when she looks at her arm, she's got a little bite mark, which is the same as where Anne Putnam back in 1692 claimed that little Orcus bit her invisibly with her witch powers.
I didn't get that. Like, I didn't understand. Well, and I think specifically it was the dog runs up. The dog is chasing the bus and running alongside it. And specifically running alongside Laureen. And it's like the dog looks up at her and then she gets that little... She's like touching the glass and then gets that little mark. But
it does kind of seem like the dog is the one that has the actual magic powers, and Merlina's kind of like a poser. It's like she's coasting off of her dog's powers.
I mean, who really wears the pants in the relationship when you have a dog or a cat, right, Mike?
And more importantly, how does the dog wear the pants? Do they wear them like this, or do they wear them like this? But they get to the Witch Museum, and sure enough, it is the exact Witch Museum, looks exactly alike, and they go through the whole presentation where there's the glowing pentagram in the floor and there's the wax dioramas with a pre-recorded voice reading over the history of the witch trials. And listener, I really cannot stress enough, it is exactly like going to the Witch Museum in Salem. This movie pretty much just recreates the experience exactly. It's still just like that.
Maybe that's why
fun.
This movie has just disappeared, is because the Salem Witch Museum was like, we don't want people getting a free ride. Like, bury it.
Those people are trying to learn for free. Get them. No, but it's pretty funny. The actual museum is just like that. Like I said, I just went a couple of months ago, and yeah, it's so corny and entertaining. They play the same like cassette tape that sounds like it was recorded like 30 years ago, and there's that like tape hiss of just that guy ominously reciting the history of the Salem witch trials.
Honestly, that detail alone like makes me really want to go, because there's something so charming about the fact that that still exists.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of those museums where it's like going back in time, but not like going back in time to, the 1600s. It's like going back in time to 1975 when like museums were like this, because they really haven't changed it at all. And yeah, all those dioramas, like those are still there at the current museum. It's very fun.
The dioramas are kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, they're good. It's fun when you go there in person, because they do the thing where like it surrounds you, and each section like lights up when they're telling a certain point of the story, and there's like goofy voice actors that like come and like give monologues as each of the characters. It's really
real
funny.
Humans, like not a recording.
No, it's all on the recording.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. The thought of
I always
some dork like that moved to Salem who's super into the history of it, like actually standing off stage and like being like, no, like more weight, would be pretty fun.
No, it's even better. It's a really corny, like obviously like cassette based recording. Like they've probably dubbed it to digital by now, but I swear every time I go there, I expect it in the middle to just go like turn tape over, like, to keep going. But the one notable difference is in the movie, it includes little Dorcas being burned alive, which is not an actual part of the Witch Museum, because as students of the Salem witch trials will know, contrary to popular belief, no one was actually burned at the stake in the Salem witch trials. It was all just hangings and that one stone pressing, and that's it.
Well, I'll tell you this, Mike. When I saw that, I was like anxious for for subsequent aspects of the film. Like, oh my god, little Orcus is actually toast. I didn't know the history.
Pretty cool. They do some cool flashing back to the burning while little Lurleen is watching it in the presentation, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and with very little explanation, either Papa Good of the Good family spontaneously teleports into the present and starts grabbing little Lurleen by the shoulders and yelling at her, or there's just a pervert loose in the museum.
Or the mannequin of him actually like is transposed with Mr. Good, and he comes through.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't he in, like, they're all saying, like, oh, no, it was a mannequin, you know, a trick of the light, you were confused. But Lorene says, it was a mannequin, and, like, then it was a man.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that until she said it, because they don't really... I mean, granted, again, we were watching this on, like, a pretty crummy VHS rip, which I forgot to say at the top of the episode, and I really should have said it at the beginning. This movie is available in full on YouTube and also on archive.org. So, despite never being released on DVD, pretty easy to watch.
Which
should you
version
watch
did
it.
you, or which, site did you watch it on?
They both looked exactly the same. I ended up downloading the archive.org version just so I didn't have to like stream it over YouTube. But I compared the two and they looked like they were the exact same copy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I watched the YouTube one and I paused it partway through where I was like, I actually really liked the fact that it was so low resolution and so murky that certain scenes like leave quite a bit to your imagination. And
yeah, that is part of the fun of watching old VHS rips and VHS tapes and stuff.
We'll have to come back to that point later because there's another aspect of the rip quality that really added to the experience for me. But but yeah, I'm glad to see that it's just kind of out there and no one cares.
Yeah.
But that scene, that moment of him just bam there all of a sudden, like screaming, reaches out, grabs her, like. That completely caught me off guard. And I didn't know I didn't know anything about this going in, Mike. Like, I thought at first it was going to just be a period piece. And it's like, oh, so it's in the present and it's going to tie it back. And then he just shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I knew it involved time travel in some respect, but I thought it was going to be more like the accused witches come back and just start fucking shit up. And instead we've got, this guy is basically like Kyle Reese in Terminator. And he just... But I don't know how he got there. Like, that's the thing. They don't really ever explain, like, why any of this is happening. There's no, like, catalyst to any of this. It's just like, oh, all of a sudden this guy just comes to the future. Like, it's not on a famous anniversary. Well, they never say that, like, the little girl is, like, blood-related or, like, a descendant of the Good family.
I assume
it just kind of happens.
She looks just like the daughter, though. What is her name? It's Good. Good with an E is the fake pretending little girl, right? Like the bad one.
No, that's Ann Putnam.
Putnam,
and then she accused Sarah Good and little Porpoise Good, and
but she looks just like Putnam, and maybe it has to do with her entering the museum. Maybe. Wait, can we talk about? I have a theory about why it happened, but we should maybe save it for when we get to later on. Yeah.
Okay, we can hold on to that.
But it has to do with the museum. Like that's the key.
Yeah, it's one of those magic museums, like in Night at the Museum. But the Papa Good, goes freaks out and goes running down the streets, and we get some nice location shooting of Salem. He runs down.
That
the main
footage
drag.
Was amazing.
Yeah, that's fun. That's 90% of the fun of movies like this is, when it's a location you recognize, especially. Like, this movie has, like, Hocus Pocus, they filmed part of that movie in Salem.
And
so you get some good Salem.
Stage.
Yeah, you get, like, some good Salem location photography in it, and not much. Same with Lords of Salem. You get some pretty cool Salem photography in that. But in this, it's, like, extremely recognizable.
It's a crew of 5 people that flew out to Salem and just shot the whole movie there, presumably.
Yeah.
Like,
and specifically in like the most touristy parts of Salem too.
Well, in that footage though, it's like a man with a big goofy Puritan hat on, running high speed, like looking over his shoulder. I guarantee you when he was doing that all the residents of Salem who saw him, like, didn't even blink.
I'm glad you brought up his goofy clothes and hat, because right after here we get probably my other favorite line in the movie, where the police are interviewing little Lorene and her teacher and her classmates, and the cop says to the teacher, like, you said you didn't get a good look at him, huh? And she goes, no, but I think he was about medium height, thin, and from what I could see, he was authentically dressed for the time period.
I actually the authentically dressed for the time period part didn't get me, but when she said
it killed me.
I think that he's medium height, that got me to laugh.
Medium height is good
like,
too.
The
Yeah,
most
that's a really funny
useless
description.
detail anyone could ever give.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 feet. But yeah, authentically dressed for the time period fucking killed me. I had to rewind that. I was dying.
The highest anxiety I had throughout the movie, honestly, was about his outfit because he never changes clothing the whole time. He's
got to have
outfit.
smelled pretty bad already because he's from the 1600s. You know,
Right.
no way he was bathing on a regular basis. But continuing the vibe that this movie has of just actually going on a field trip to Salem, the class next goes to the graveyard where Lorene gets fascinated by a particular gravestone as creepy Papa Good is watching her. Not very well concealed. I feel like anyone would have seen him from a mile away. He's hiding behind like a shrub.
He's not even really hiding. He's like conspicuously, cartoonishly creeping forward.
Again, I feel like the more clever version of this movie would take place around Halloween, so then he could like just obviously blend in with everybody.
Oh my god, that's brilliant,
you know.
Mike.
Yeah, Burt I Gordon should have called me up. Granted, I wasn't born yet, but
I mean, you could have been alive in a previous body as this movie.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. But as he's watching, their teacher gets sort of final destinationed by a falling tree branch.
That was awesome. I did not expect that. I thought that for sure the Puritan was gonna, at the last minute, push Lorene out of the way. And then when it became clear the teacher was, like maybe gonna intervene, he might push her out of the way. But no, she just gets iced.
Yeah, that was the vibe I got too. And yeah, I was also wrong. Yeah. Another death was someone kind of just spitting up a bunch of blood.
Well, and that girl, Lorene, her performance is amazing. Like, she screams her head off. Like, before that, she's already done it twice, 3 times. Mm-hmm. And when her teacher dies, she's like, it's good because they show close-ups of the teacher. Like, clearly they didn't drench her in blood with all these child actors right there. But the idea that the character, like, just dealt with this insane Puritan rushing at her, and then, seeing her teacher die like that, she screams her head off, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, no, I made that same note in my notes. It's a very convincing freak out, and it's honestly like kind of upsetting to watch. It's pretty intense.
She has several else in the movie after that point, and there was a moment where I was like squirming, just like, this kid is too good at this. It's very frightening.
Yeah, probably the best performance in the movie, honestly. Although I do like the guy playing Papa Good. He's got just because he's got a very goofy fake accent.
I liked Papa Good, and I liked Paris. I thought Paris was really cool. Like he had a good voice more than anything.
Yeah, he was pretty good. But they take little Lorene to a shrink, good old fashioned movie shrink. Where she starts acting extremely possessed. She's speaking in several voices, not her own.
I got really worried at that point. I was like, oh shit, is the rest of this movie just going to be like an Exorcist ripoff?
Yeah, I had the same thought. Also, I like that her, typical movie shrink is also an expert on both witchcraft and early American dialects, and so knows exactly what's going on.
Like he's picking up all the books at the house. Where he's like what does he say? He's like the Necronomicon.
Oh my god! His pronunciation of Necronomicon was so funny. I believe he calls it the Necromicon.
That's it, Necromicon. And at one point, I think it's earlier than that scene where he's just like, "This is an ancient book on the occult." Like he's perfectly familiar with it. But yeah, 70s psychiatrist. It's, they're basically like the do-all character in a movie.
Yeah, very laid back too. But eventually, Papa Good shows up and tries to, show that he means no harm, and he's talking to little Lorene. But
when he breaks in through the bedroom window,
yeah, looking like a total creep as per usual. But the mom busts in with a gun and shoots him twice point blank, and apparently he's impervious to bullets, which is another thing I don't think they ever explain.
I don't
Did you catch any of that?
I didn't catch why I didn't catch any sort of explanation for it, but based on like the tree falling and just killing the teacher, when he was talking with the girl, I was like, I wouldn't put it past this movie if he's holding her face or something, and he's like, you look like her, but you're not evil, you're good. I thought for a second, like, I wouldn't put it past this movie if the mom just like comes into the room and shoots him dead. And, just that mere like communication between them is what like maybe drives the plot forward, where the girl like, her suspicions are conformed or something. But, no, he's impervious to bullets and they just vanish when they hit him.
Yeah, and the closest we get to an explanation is after the cops then show up and prove that he was not impervious to just being handcuffed. So they just take him down to the station, and the incredibly chauvinist cop just keeps telling the mom like, yeah, no, I women just can't shoot.
No, I think
women just can't shoot guns.
The line is, he's saying it in like this really like sympathetic tone to her, where he goes, I've never met a woman who lived up to the name woman who like can't handle or who can handle a gun. He phrases it weirdly, but he's basically saying, the only women I've ever met who can handle a gun are not women, which that is a whole story unto itself. That's the only thing that jumped out as me as like ultra chauvinistic or dated.
It's kind of out of nowhere.
The psychiatrist says something at later in the movie, I think, where he's like, "You are divorced, aren't you?" And the wife, like sheepishly, is like, Well, yes. And that probably would have been a bit risque to discuss on the ABC Family Movie of the Week.
It's funny because at this point Shelby was watching the movie with me, and we like I said, we recently went to Salem and did all the like fun touristy tours and stuff, and we learned that there's a curse on the sheriffs in Salem. Because there was this one sheriff back in the 1600s who apparently he like was, if I'm getting this all right, he was like an opportunist who kind of like seized a bunch of Giles Corey's property after he was executed. This just like shithead sheriff, and then he died of a heart attack at a pretty young age, and since then every sheriff of Salem would like develop like heart disease or heart attacks.
Is that
or high
true?
Blood pressure.
Every
apparently
sheriff?
I mean, as I was saying to Shelby when we were on this tour, I was like, I feel like sheriffs just probably have a high propensity towards like heart disease.
Oh yeah,
high blood pressure anyway.
That makes perfect sense.
But yeah, Shelby was watching the movie with me at this point, and she was like, God, I hope this guy gets a fucking heart attack.
He was pretty fun though as a character, like throughout it, like his complaining and whatnot. He was probably the most TV of the movie aspect of it. Like there's a character he's complaining to later. He's like, I got a witness who's a dog, like just listing all these things off. It felt like a pilot for like a Columbo spinoff.
Yeah, that actor is another guy who was just an old school character actor. He apparently has over 150 film and TV credits. His name is Albert Salmi, which of course every time I saw it in the credits I kept reading as Albert Salami.
I actually, funnily enough, the movie ends, the credits come up, his name's like on the first little list there, and I was like getting verbal Mike by the end of the movie. I was just like, yeah! And the credits came up, and it's like this movie made it to the finish line without fucking it up or something. Like, it actually turned out to be awesome, through and through. And the credits came up, and I thought that for a split second his last name was Salem, and I was just like, yeah! Oh, wait, no. But Salami is a more fun misread.
Yeah, Al Salami. I like it. But from here, little Lorene goes investigating in the dark again, and this time she gets attacked by a zombie of Judge Reverend Paris from the witch trials. Comes up with some kind of goofy oatmeal zombie makeup
Was it oatmeal zombie
starts
makeup?
tormenting.
Like, you could see that. Maybe they were different versions, because...
No, I mean, this is just what I could see. This scene was incredibly dark in the VHS rip we were watching, and I frankly could not tell what was going on. But I don't think I missed much. I think he's just kind of like grabbing at her and going, meh.
Well, I think we later, there's a couple of other scenes that have, like, are just, like, so dark you can barely see anything. But first and foremost, I liked that with this scene, because I was like, what the fuck is like, you could see his face, and it was creepy, his voice was spooky, but he was doing something to her. And you see, like, her eye, I don't know if they put contact lenses on her, but, like, her eyes are glowing or, like, reflecting light in an interesting way, like, in some scenes thereafter. But, well, I guess, should we discuss the worms, or should we wait?
We can get there, because I think we got to set up first. So, there's a reporter that shows up who's sniffing around the case now, because he wants to know what's up with this weird guy dressed as a Puritan who's hovering around these little kids, and the shrink gives him an extremely good line reading where he just says, "Would you please go away?" And just kind of shoos the guy off his doorstep. So the reporter then makes his way down to the library to do some Salem witch trials research, which, again, if he's a local reporter, I feel like he should know all this shit already. But he goes to the library, and as soon as he gets to the library, it's very clear that this guy is going to bite the dust. Like, this movie is very graceless when it comes to setting up its body count padding death scenes.
I mean, there's not many of the death scenes like that. You're right, though. Like, from here on out.
But they're telegraphed all to hell. Like, you see them coming a mile away when they're coming.
The tree, for example, like that, I didn't expect to happen the way it did. But this guy, it's like when he was at the door and they're standing there, the psychiatrist, and he's like trying to get them to let him in as if he's being sympathetic, and he says, like, the guy's a Puritan. And they're like, Do you really believe him? He's like, well, no, but it makes for a good story. Like, why would you tell them that? You only exist to be cannon fodder. That's all.
He's there to die in like 5 minutes from now. But
his death
but to
is
be fair,
interesting.
He gets the coolest death in the movie, I think, because he's at this library after dark. Apparently, for some reason. I
thought it was the museum, but I think you're right. It must have been the library.
And Lorene shows up there, and this is maybe another area where watching it on a bad VHS rip kind of obscured things, but at first I couldn't tell what she was doing. I thought it was like, did she stab him? Because she hugs him.
Or him, yes.
And then he starts grabbing his back and collapsing, and that spooky dog from earlier is there, and the dog is running around. And then, like, tentacles just burst out of his back, like worm tentacles. That was my reading on it. It was like it was a very Lovecraftian death scene. It was like weird tentacles burst out of his back, and then he just dies.
I agree. I had this almost the same like experience where at first I assumed the way that they shoot it first, you don't see his back. She holds him. She puts her arms around him. Then he goes like and he puts her down, and I thought that she must have stabbed him with something, but then the wet spot on his back, it looked to me vaguely like it was the fingers of a skeletal hand, like emerging from him. But I think based on what happens in subsequent scenes and also ties back to the graveyard scene with Paris, I think it's worms erupting from him.
Yeah, they looked kind of wormy.
Do you ever read...
either way, a cool death scene.
There's this... do you ever read...
either way, a cool death scene.
There's like, worm magic, where Paris has some affinity for worms. I think in that earlier scene, I think he's infesting her with worms, possibly.
Oh, I don't think I caught that.
And then here, like, because before, she's kind of like conflicted, like, she has these weird stirrings and whatnot. Like, but after that, she gets full-blown possessed occasionally. And I think what's happening is she's like full of these worms, and then she can infect others with them.
She's full of piss and vinegar and worms.
Charles Bukowski.
But I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So after the weird worm-infested death of this reporter, the cops come around to question Merlina the witch because they found her dog at the scene, apparently. I find it hard to believe the cops wouldn't have just shot the dog because that feels like standard operating procedure.
I'll give them credit for that restraint where, like, there's a dog in a room with a gory mess where a man was, and they take him back to the lab and they test him, and they give him the benefit of the doubt, innocent till proven guilty.
It's like the one time a cop didn't shoot a dog. But they go to question Merlina, and I actually do kind of love this scene because they end up actually just questioning the dog. Because Merlina,
like, literally, yeah.
It was like, well, he was the one at the scene, ask him.
And he refuses to answer questions.
Yeah, the dog knows his Fifth Amendment rights.
His performance is awesome, too. Like, the way that dog looks up at Merlina, he, like, looks her right in the eye. Yeah. It was very striking. He had already been my favorite character, but that's where he won my heart.
That's the thing. They spend so much of the first half of this movie trying to make the dog look creepy, and it's just the cutest dog.
It never
looks
never
so
works.
friendly.
He's got
never looks creepy at all.
There was a moment, like, fairly early, like when they're on their way into the museum, where the footage is murky again for a second, and it's supposed to be the dog is, like, hiding in the shadows nearby, and there's just this thing in the middle of the screen. I was like, what is that? It's like, oh, that's his perfectly cartoon pink tongue hanging out of his mouth, framed by, like, the triangle of his smile. Like, the cutest possible thing. Yeah, not the right dog for the role, in theory.
But anyway, the witch is offering to help, and she even forms an uneasy alliance with the locked up Puritan, which I kind of like that scene too. Just like, he's like, "Oh, you're a real witch? Like, I don't know.
We can
know
walk
if I trust a real
freely
witch
now." Yeah. Well, she gives off the vibe of being, like, a neutral, not like black magic, but maybe not white magic, but she doesn't come across as being evil.
No, she's just like a lady that sells crystals in, like, one of the gift shops in Salem.
Oh, no. She's a tier above that, Mike. She walks around with a wolf-headed cane.
I don't know. Her wig looked pretty bad, though.
That was a wig?
I mean, that looked like a wig to me.
That was absolutely a wig. I liked her look, though. She had it going.
She makes it work. But around here we get a flashback that reveals that it was not just, Ann Putnam being an evil little child demon. It was actually the Judge Paris, that was putting her up to all this. It was really his fault because he wanted to be famous.
He wanted.
I think is the vibe I got.
I think it was that he wanted to get people into his church, is what they were saying. And by basically, like, making everyone afraid of the witches and kind of showing his authority in dealing with them, he believed that they would all go to his church. But
yeah,
that's kind of a tricky historical, like, inaccuracy, in the sense that, like, everyone went to church for 8 hours every Sunday. That's what being a Puritan was all about. So,
well, maybe he was playing the extra long game and just trying to turn Salem into the tourist town it became. He was like, "Look, we need something. We're going to make this place a tourist destination by hook or by crook.
We're going to get it working here. It might take a few years, but before long, we'll be swimming in money."
Around this time, the movie kind of meanders for a bit. There's a scene where little Lorene gets visited by one of those corpses from Poltergeist that just kind of pops out of the ground. I couldn't tell who the corpse was supposed to be. Shelby thought it was maybe supposed to be Tituba, the slave from Tituba. She was the another real life person. She was the slave, or possibly indentured servant, I think probably slave, of the family in Salem that entertained the kids, and that the kids all said taught them witchcraft. And so she was, of course, one of the people that got locked up.
It sounded to me like it was a child, like or a very young woman's kind of sing-songy ghost voice, where she was saying, like, you have to save Orcus in order to. That was another thing that kind of threw me for a loop. Like, she was saying, our souls are doomed. Like, you have to save our souls by preventing Orcus from, being burned at the stake. Which, like, how does that fit into Christian mythology, right? Like,
well,
they didn't do anything wrong, and why is their fate, like, after death tied to the little girl? Like, that seemed like an unnecessary attempt on the screenwriter's part to me to raise the stakes.
Well, there's part of it I think is clever, but I'll get back to that in a minute once we get to the climax of the film. I just want to throw out a quick mention to another, probably the most confusing of the weird body count deaths that we get at this point, which is the shrink.
That one was amazing.
I don't even remember who he's calling, but he goes to a phone booth to call someone and say, like, no, this stuff's
the
actually all real. Okay, yeah. So he's calling her to say, like, I believe in this stuff now. And some zombie corpse, maybe it was supposed to be Reverend Paris, busts into the phone booth, and as near as I can tell, just shoves his fingers in the doctor's mouth, and then the doctor just dies.
Oh.
Was that what happened? What happened?
I think you're doing it more justice than it deserves, and that's not, I'm not knocking the movie.
It's a very confusing death scene.
I loved it. I thought it was great. He's on the phone with the wife. He's like, it's real. It's all real. Time travel. And then he pulls the phone away from his face because he hears the door to the phone booth like snap shut. And then he's just kind of like holding the phone for like, a minute. And then as soon as he pulls the phone up to his face, the mother is like frantically asking him something. He goes, don't interrupt me. And is about to continue his spiel. And then like the camera's in the phone booth with him at this point. Then there's just a hand, like a skeleton hand in his mouth. And so I don't think it really busts in. It's like, my read on it is that it manifested in there. But yeah, it sticks its
you're
fingers
meeting it more than halfway at that point.
Well, and it sticks its fingers in his mouth, and I think 2 of the fingers break off in his mouth. And I thought, like, he would, it's like they break off and maybe, like, he would start, like, gagging and worms would come out of his ears and stuff like that. But he just drops like a rag doll. Like, that is it for him. I think maybe they just...
Yeah, it seems like he was supposed to be, like, poisoned or something, but it's not clear at all.
I mean, I would not want Preacher Paris's fingers in my mouth. That would definitely make me want to pass out.
Maybe he was just playing dead so he would go away.
Wouldn't be a bad move. It's so... The character of Paris is so strange, too. And, like, in the graveyard, he's taunting the girl, where he's like, if you dare, like, oppose me. Because they reveal... what is her name again? The villainous young girl?
Ann Putnam.
Putnam, like, was conflicted about what she was doing once it got to the point that Orcus is going to be burned, because she's, like, a little 5-year-old girl. And Paris is like, no, you're in it. You're doing this with me. And so when the 1970s girl shows up at the graveyard, he's like, if you try as she tried, I'll turn you into a leper and like your skin will rot off. And so like he can threaten her with that, but then with the psychiatrist, he has to like physically like manifest a hand that goes into his mouth. And in other areas, there's the worms. Like, there's no consistency with it.
No, they just needed some death scenes and needed to fill some time.
They were all great.
I think one of them is great. But we get to the climax where they go back to the witch museum, back to that big pentagram on the floor. I love that they go back to the museum for the climax of the movie.
And they cut to the museum by showing the pentagram in glowing neon blue, which was epic.
And Merlina just does your classic movie exorcism. Lorene kind of starts melting a little bit during part of it, which of course made me just think of The Wizard of Oz, and I wanted her to go, I'm melting, melting.
I liked that. That was like them. That was a callback to the threat that Paris made, where he's like, I will make you rot as a leper. And so as she's trying to step towards Merlina, she's like rotting. Her face is like starting to puff up and get all nasty.
But the part I do think is clever, though, to get back to this, is so she apparently, in order to right all these wrongs, she needs to literally like time travel to the past, go back into the body of little Ann Putnam, and stop the burning of little Dorcas. And I actually thought this part was kind of clever because when they first showed like early on in the movie Dorcas getting burned at the stake, I was doing my acting like I was smarter than the movie, being like, I know no witches were actually burned in Salem. And I looked up that little girl. She didn't get burned. She didn't even get hanged. She just got imprisoned for about 6 months, presumably because she turned state's evidence against other witches. But,
oh my god, I love that a little girl. I mean, I don't love that a little girl was imprisoned, but like the fact that like that was how Puritan justice works, where it's like, you know, they're murdering all of these people, and then it's like, oh, she is 5. Like,
yeah, just like her for 6 months.
Throw her in prison for 6 months. That'll teach her. The poor thing.
But so I do find it kind of clever that I guess, you know, in the world of the movie, the whole first part of the movie takes place in an alternate timeline where Dorcas was burned at the stake, and only by setting it to the correct timeline does she resolve all of these issues. Fuck all those other people though. All the other one that got, you know, hanged and pressed to death. Doesn't seem to matter about them. She just had to avert this one witch death.
Did they show, like, after the aversion of the death, like, did they show a change in the museum? Like, I assume they never actually show, but, like, there's no scene, of course, or moment where, like, the burning at the stake diorama just fades out of existence or something. But, like, do you recall if they explicitly like show that is no longer there?
I don't think they do. They probably should have, because it is funny when they first show that in the museum in the beginning, because the little girl chained up in the courtroom is like plainly like much crappier than like all the other dioramas over there. So it's clearly,
oh my god, that's amazing. I have to go back and look at it now that you say that, because that doll did like stand out to me. It looks creepier kind of, but yeah, I actually thought when the reporter was at the library and he's like digging up records, it occurred to me, I was like, well, if this movie is going to be about saving the little girl, if that's going to be the climax, like they've already established that she gets burned, it'd be kind of cool if like he goes to find her records and they don't exist, or they're like water damaged and it's not clear what her fate was, but they showed her in the museum at the beginning. So kind of a missed opportunity. But I like your take that it is in fact a alternate timeline altogether.
I think so. Yeah, if I had to guess. But that is basically our movie. That is The Coming, 1981, aka Burned at the Stake. What did you think of the movie overall?
Oh, I loved it, Mike. It was amazing. The VHS experience aspect of it was, as the climax was building, really kicked into full gear. Like, I highly recommend, if you're listening to this 5 years from now and like Vinegar Syndrome has put out a Blu-ray, track down the VHS version. Like, the little villainous girl is crying. She doesn't want to say anything other than to confess to the group before they burn the 5-year-old. And Paris is like holding her by the shoulders. He's like, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. She just starts saying like, burn the witch, burn the witch, burn the witch, and starts screaming it. And bam, right as that is happening, the VHS gets like all warped and like the tracking kicks in. And I was just like, yeah. And that was like the moment where, because at that point, no one had said burn the witch. And when I think witch movie, I think of Touch of Satan, and like Burn the Witch is said 1,000 times in that. And it was like this climactic moment of the movie where it's just like, burn the witch, burn the witch. And yeah, that I am so stoked for Halloween, Mike. Thank you for sharing this movie with me.
No problem. Yeah, this was unintentional. You know, like I said, I just kind of went with it because I was like, witches, this seems Halloween-y. But yeah, it was a very good Halloween vibe. So yeah, you know, not necessarily the best movie. I would say, you know, if I was, you know, in charge of programming a double feature at a movie theater and I somehow stumbled upon like a 35mm print of this movie, I would do a double feature of this and Lords of Salem. And I think that would be very fun.
That is an excellent pairing. Yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, yeah, this is right up the alley of something like Vinegar Syndrome. And I'm looking online, like VHS tapes of this appear very scarce even. So yeah, this movie, it's not great, but I would say it's fun enough as a curiosity, especially for locals in the area, that I would say it's worthy of rediscovery.
Well, fantastic, Mike. Now we have it. We are on our war path to final, like the big milestone of the month, Halloween itself.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready. I'm ready. I hope we discover that each of us are reincarnated versions of who do you want to be? You want to be Papa Good? I'll be Giles Corey. Dibs on Giles Corey.
I'll take Paris. I don't mind.
Yeah, you could do Paris.
He's got worms, you know. Oh no, I take it back. Cerberus, because that poor dog. There's no way that dog is still acting at this point.
No, probably not. if I had to guess. All right. Well, happy Halloween, Dan.
Happy Halloween, Mike. And to you at home.
Happy Halloween to all of you.
Oh, sorry.
No, I stepped on your line. You go.
Well, I was going to say, and to those of you at home listening, I call to thee, infinite power of the universe!
Okay, your outro was much better than mine.
That was my, that's a line from the movie, Mike.
Oh, I know.
I imagine I just ended it that way, and it was like, what is that from? It's like, oh, I was in the Halloween spirit. That is the most 1970s occult line I've ever heard. I love it.